Here to dive into industry trends with leading ETF experts, this is ETF Spotlight with Neena Mishra.
Hello and welcome to ETF Spotlight. I'm your host, Neena Mishra. My guest today is Zacks senior stock strategist, Kevin Cook, who is our in-house technology expert. And we're talking about quantum computing today. And in fact, we had Kevin on the show back in December after Google had unveiled its Willow chip. And these quantum computing stocks had surged then. And we are looking at the performance just a couple of minutes back, and the ride has been pretty wild. And a lot has happened since we had Kevin on the show in December. So Microsoft and Amazon unveiled their quantum computing chips. And that led to speculation that this futuristic technology could be inching closer to reality. And then Nvidia held its Quantum Day. That was yesterday. And for reference, we are recording this on Friday, March 20th. So we'll talk about all these developments. And Kevin has successfully traded some of these stocks in his Taser portfolio. So we'll talk about those stocks too, and the quantum computing ETF QTUM. That I believe is one of the best ways to invest in this technology. So welcome back, Kevin. I'm really excited about this discussion.
Yeah, I attended virtually. I attended the Nvidia Quantum powwow yesterday. And it was super exciting. So I have a lot to tell you about that. But since you mentioned the Microsoft Majorana chip, that was just so cool too. After Google brings Willow, then Microsoft Majorana, that project, I mean, Satya Nadella said, we've essentially been working on this for 30 years. And I had no idea. Like in 2016, 17, I profiled that Microsoft was working on using DNA to encode data, which I thought that that's going to be a mind-blowing innovation when they can use DNA to encode data, because they'll fit so much more information. It'll blow away the even GPUs. But then they launch this quantum computing chip, which just sounds amazing. And he's so proud of it. And he's been there for a long time. I think he's been at Microsoft for like 25 years. And just all the teams that work together. And we'll talk about Krista, who is a technical fellow for Microsoft. And she was on the show yesterday. So yeah, steer away. And I'll, there was a lot of controversy yesterday.
Okay.
I watched
talk about that too.
Yeah. So there's some layers to unpack. As Jensen brought, a dozen different CEOs and scientific leaders from a dozen different companies, only 3 of which are public.
So let's talk about NVIDIA's Quantum Day in a little bit. Before that, I think it would be helpful to set the stage with your key takeaways from NVIDIA's GTC, because investors were laser focused on this event for signals on the future of AI trade. And Nvidia did announce some very exciting new partnerships in the areas of self-driving car, robotics. They announced more powerful cutting-edge chips and a quantum computing research center. So tell us a little bit about your key takeaways from GTC.
It's like Christmas twice a year for me. And Jensen never disappoints. He just brings so much innovation and such a vision for the future. I mean, I'm telling people, like, Jensen is living 5 years in the future, and he's trying to tell us about it if we would only listen. And so that's the way I look at it. So anybody worried about, is Blackwell, is the new Blackwell chip, is it in production? Is it being shipped? Is it working? Is it cooling? Like, he put all that to rest. It's blowing the doors off of Hopper sales. And he's so confident in where this is going and the vision. He even, he almost shot himself in the foot. He said, talking about how great Blackwell is, especially with this new software accelerator called Dynamo that makes Blackwell 40 times better than Hopper. He said in his keynote, he's like, why would anybody buy Hopper anymore? He said, yeah, that makes me the chief revenue destroyer. He goes, my sales guys are going to kill me, but Hopper will still sell, because all this stuff is integrative. Like I compare Nvidia, I say they have the iPhone cycle, but better. Meaning when you know people that buy a new iPhone every next generation. I certainly don't, but some people are into that. There's enough people, that have Apple sales, over 450 billion. But what makes the Nvidia GPU cycle better with, iterating now they're on a 1-year rhythm cadence of just massive innovation. And, Hopper goes from Hopper's, 80 billion transistors to now Blackwell is 208 billion transistors. What makes it work even better for Nvidia is that enterprises don't throw out the Hoppers; they integrate it all. So it's because of CUDA, the way CUDA works, you have this multiplicative integration with software updates that make it all work seamlessly, even as you upgrade to the latest, fastest, better, not necessarily cheaper GPU.
Right. So now let's talk about NVIDIA's Quantum Day. So in January, all these quantum computing stocks had plunged because Jensen predicted that useful quantum computers were still 15, 20 years away. And his comments yesterday didn't help these stocks much. I think most of them were trading down yesterday. So tell us about NVIDIA's Quantum Day and what did you learn from the Quantum Day event?
Yeah. So as you pointed out, Jensen made some comments in January. That was at CES, in fact, and they were offhand comments. He wasn't, it wasn't part of a presentation. He was just asked a question by an analyst about quantum, and Jensen just, he spoke his truth from, off the top of his head, and he said, hey, this stuff could easily be 10, 15, 20 years away, which is actually legitimate when you look at the science and the developments compared to what NVIDIA is doing with accelerated computing now. So yes, that week of CES, the stocks tanked. Luckily, as you know, we talked about in December, I owned Rigetti. And so that second week of January at CES, I had already sold a bunch of Rigetti. Like it went up to $20. We owned it from $1 and it went up to $20, and we cashed in like 1,300% gains in Rigetti. Luckily, before Jensen dropped that hammer, and then I sold some more. But the reason he did the Quantum Day yesterday at GTC, this was not planned, 6 months in advance. After he saw what happened to the quantum computing stocks like Rigetti, like D-Wave, like AONQ, he felt sympathetic. He's like, hey, okay, let's he created a space in GTC. He said, okay, let's have a session where I invite all these CEOs and their expert engineers and scientists, and he wanted to patch things up, have sort of a kumbaya, right? And when he opened yesterday, I think everybody should watch it, because I'm going to tell you a lot of things today, and try and frame what we learned from these companies. And then, some people will say, you'll hear, oh man, Jensen was a little bit condescending. He made comments that dashed their stocks in January. Then he invites him on stage, and some people thought he was, not that gracious. But there's several layers to this. First of all, Jensen does have a duty to tell the truth and separate reality from emerging science. I'm not going to call it science fiction, because there are breakthroughs in quantum computing. But he needs to make that distinction between what NVIDIA does now and why it's going to, do 250 billion in sales next year, and what these companies are doing. They're very experimental. And he also pointed out that, in NVIDIA's early days, there was a point where NVIDIA was on its deathbed. Nobody knew the future. He said when they first started making graphics processing units, they actually picked the wrong technology. I don't know if I'm quoting him exactly, but he said we actually, went down the wrong path, and we still survived because we figured out that we needed to come up with an application, that met the market where it was. And so that's that's another theme he tried to actually help these companies with and say, maybe your positioning is wrong. Calling it a quantum computer is a little bit misleading because it's not a computer that's going to replace, general purpose CPU or accelerated GPU. It's he suggested it's more of an instrument maybe, and it can solve very, very specific problems. Well, a lot of the CEOs they didn't take offense, but they took issue with Jensen calling it an instrument, when they're out there doing experiments. And so what I recommend to everybody is find the replay on YouTube. And if you're interested in quantum computing, you own these stocks or you want to own them, find the replay on their YouTube channel because it's a clinic. Like to hear, I didn't know there was really going to be a dozen CEOs and technical leads on the stage, but yeah, he did them 6 at a time, and he had all the public guys out first in the first group, and then he had a bunch more private companies in the second group, and to listen to each one of them, I mean, oh my God, it was so impressive. Like, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a computer scientist, I'm certainly not a physicist, but these guys could speak in plain language and help you understand their different technologies. And what problems they were trying to solve, and what the deep R&D that they're doing. So that's why it was just so fascinating. And Jensen tried to help them with their positioning, to focus on real world applications. So there were some other controversies that I can tell you about later, but I'll let you ask the questions.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. Jensen was trying to help these companies, and he believes in the technology and the future of the technology. And as you mentioned, some of the CEOs took issues with his earlier comments, and he was joking that he didn't know that these quantum computing companies are publicly traded. So one of the CEOs has in fact called out Jensen for his comments on quantum computing, and that is D-Wave's CEO. And that is a stock that you own, and that is a portfolio. You have successfully traded it, booked profit, and you still hold a small position, and you are sitting on a huge gain of almost 800%. So let's talk a little bit about D-Wave. This company claimed to have achieved quantum supremacy. And basically that means it is able to solve problems which are beyond the capability of classical supercomputers. And in a science paper, they basically demonstrated that their quantum machine was able to simulate a complex magnetic material in just about 20 minutes. And they said this task would take a supercomputer nearly 1 million years. Now, the claim is being disputed by many physicists, and their main issue is that probably classical computers can also achieve comparable results. So talk a little bit about D-Wave and what you think of the stock now.
Yeah, so that was, and Jensen invited, Alan Baratz, the CEO of D-Wave, was sitting right next to Jensen. So he had they could spar, a few feet away from each other. And so Jensen invited him to, talk about the controversy, which I thought was good. It's like Jensen's like, yeah, let's hear about the controversy. And I think that was a perfect opportunity for Alan to say, hey, here's what we did. Here's what's different about what we did. And for anybody to say that, okay, a quantum computer has achieved quantum supremacy and can now do what a classical computer does, that's a little too too broad. And really, they solved a very specific problem, as you pointed out, in material science. So I'm looking at this article in Scientific American. You can just Google it. I would just Google D-wave controversy, and you'll find the articles that got published. This would have been like right after March 12th when they released their paper. But this stuff is complicated, and the fact that you have a public company doing this R&D and achieving some kind of results, and then they have to back them up and prove them, there's probably going to be a second paper coming from D-Wave with more details of their data, so that the physics community basically can evaluate it. This is not just in the hands of computer scientists or engineers. This is the physicists want to look at this stuff too. So I think it's just an exciting place to be. And you mentioned that I own D-Wave. Well, luckily, what happened as we approached this quantum computing day at Nvidia GTC is that the stocks rallied into it, right? So my D-Wave went from, $5 to $12. And we took profits of 1,100% up there just because, to me, it was like, okay, they're not being acquired. They don't all of a sudden have a new $1 billion contract. So this is really just retail FOMO into the event, buying the stock. So that's why we sold about 2/3 of our position. And, so I'm a little bit proud of that, because I like to have my followers in my Taser portfolio, instead of us being the FOMO chasers, we want to be the FOMO profit takers. And so that's what we did.
So as you mentioned, this stuff is complicated. Yeah, I totally agree. And we don't want to go too far into the weeds. But as you said, we try to keep track of some of these developments, because these are so interesting developments. And quantum mechanics is complicated. Physics is not easy at all. And I have studied physics in grad school, so I just try to keep track of developments like you do. So let's talk about these developments as far as announcements by Microsoft and Amazon are concerned. And before that, I think it would help our listeners if we talk a little bit about basics of quantum computing for a couple of minutes. So traditional computers use bits, which can represent only 0 or 1. Quantum computers, on the other hand, use quantum bits or qubits. And then qubits leverage quantum effects like superposition. Particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously, and entanglement, where particles remain interconnected even when they are physically separated. And because of these properties, quantum computers can process information at exponentially faster rates than classical computers. So that is why they have the potential to change the world. That is why so much excitement about this technology. Now, the problem is that these qubits are fragile, and they can maintain their quantum states for only tiny fractions of a second. So information that is stored, that is quickly lost, and then they should be kept at extremely cold temperature. Now, going back about Microsoft Majorana chip, so we know that traditionally matter exists in 3 states: solid, liquid, and gas. Microsoft claimed that they have created a new state of matter, which previously existed only in theory. Now, this state is known as topological state, and they use these topological qubits. So these topological qubits, they have several advantages. They are very fast, they are digitally controllable, and they are scalable. And according to Microsoft, these qubits can be integrated into a single chip, which is small enough to fit in the palm of one's hand. And they have that picture on their website. And yet it is capable of scaling up to 1 million qubit. And million is important because scientists estimates that for a quantum computer to reliably run on commercial grade programs, it needs at least 1 million qubits. So I think Microsoft's Majorana announcement was pretty exciting. Tell us what you think about their chip.
Well, again, as I said, I'm just so impressed with, the top CEOs of what we call the Mag 7. One thing that they all really do well is they surround themselves with the top engineering talent in the world. And they can afford to, but it's also, it also takes a CEO with an ego that says, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So let's find the best talent that loves to work on this stuff and just let them loose. And so, that's what all these companies do well. Majorana topological computing, very fascinating. I was just trying to find, I did a Twitter thread on it right after it was announced because it was so intriguing to me. I had never heard of topological computing. And so I did a Twitter thread. I can't find it right now, but this is where you get to all they have a video. It's like a 2 or 3 minute video, and it features their technical lead that I mentioned before. I forget her name. But the one thing I want to emphasize is that, so you said that, the quantum world is hard to understand, and you studied physics, so I have a special report that I just updated late last year on quantum computing, where I have 10 quotes from 10 of the most famous physicists of the 20th century, Einstein, Bohr, Schrodinger, and they all say something that's sort of similar, like, basically, I don't understand quantum mechanics, and I don't want anything more to do with it. Like people like Einstein saying that because it was so disruptive and so confusing. And so that's the kind of way you want to approach for our audience. If you're trying to understand quantum computing, give yourself a break and know that even the greatest minds in physics in the 20th century were confused, annoyed, disturbed, and frustrated with quantum mechanics. That particles are here 1 minute, and they're not the next, or they're in simultaneous states, or it's a wave, or it's a particle. So this is the world that the quantum computing companies are dealing in. And one of the simplest ways that I found to explain it is, okay, since we're talking about superposition, that an atom or a particle could be in 2 different states or places at once, the best way to think about it is, what bits and bytes are, zeros and ones, right? Now think about probability states. Well, what is probability? Probability is everything that exists between 0 and the number 1, right? So that's what's happening now. Instead of talking about bits and bytes, zeros or ones, now we talk about all the things that can happen between 0 and 1, because these are conditional probability states. And so that's the world of physics we're entering. It's very weird. By the way, if anybody wants a copy of my most recent quantum computing report, you can just email me, kcook@zax.com, and I'll send it to you. So the other thing I want to point, so Microsoft unveils topological computing, but there's 6 different other breeds or animals in this kingdom. I mean, AONQ, Peter Chapman, they do trapped ion computing. So a company like QUBT, which is private and backed by Honeywell, Rajiv Hazra, they also do this trapped ion computing, and they're looking for the highest fidelity and the lowest error rate. That's something you'll hear them talk about a lot, is fidelity and error rate are the keys to getting to the million qubit instrument. Rigetti does superconducting, gate based, like a sort of an older version of quantum computing. And that sort of relates to what Microsoft is doing with these new superconducting materials. There was a gentleman on there from QEra, another private company, They're focused on single atoms and controlling them with laser beams. It sounds like science fiction, right? There's a company called Pascal, also private. They use a neutral atom technology. I can't explain that to you right now because, again, I'm not an expert in physics. And then D-Wave does superconducting that's similar to Rigetti. And they also they had another innovation recently where they've proved something with blockchain. So they had an announcement where they have a quantum blockchain architecture. So if this could be a real world business application that could take off if it's valid and it's robust, because there's plenty of blockchain companies out there who are looking for faster technology to validate transactions. So that's one thing. That's another thing that D-Wave has going for it. And then let's not forget that Jensen said that they just announced their new quantum center in Boston, so they could be close to MIT and Harvard. I think that was already in the works. Something tells me that I think we already heard that, but he confirmed it. So, but what's more exciting is our home, Chicago, is where we had the first quantum exchange, right? The CQE, the Chicago Quantum Exchange, is where a lot of these companies work. I call it sort of the Manhattan Project of the 21st century, because Fermilab and Argonne are famous in Illinois for doing the experimental physics that led to the atomic bomb in the 40s. Well, and the University of Chicago was instrumental. Well, now the University of Chicago hosts the Chicago Quantum Exchange, and many of these companies are partners. So there's sort of this collaboration going on where they're able to do deep R&D, and you could just imagine the conversations that they have in the hallway, or if they go out for a beer.
Excellent. Very, very, very exciting. So you mentioned Schrodinger's quote in your report, and we will include the link to your quantum computing report in the show notes in the article version of this podcast. But going back to Schrodinger's cat was the famous thought experiment about quantum particles, that a hypothetical cat can be considered both dead and alive at the same time. And I think that's a nice segue to our discussion about Amazon's quantum computing approach. So just a week after Microsoft's announcement, Amazon unveiled their Ocelot quantum computing chip, and this uses a new approach. And I had mentioned the problem about error in quantum in qubits. So they use a new approach for this quantum error correction, and they leverage special quantum bits, and these are called CAT qubits. Obviously, the name is inspired by Schrodinger's cat. And this is a prototype, not a full-blown quantum system. But they are claiming that this is capable of reducing quantum computing errors by up to 90%. So very exciting. Any thoughts on Amazon's announcement?
Yeah, I have not looked at Ocelot very closely, so I don't know, any of the specifications or science behind it. But I again, just like Satya at Microsoft, Bezos assembled a top team of engineers and physicists to work on this. So I expect we're going to have some exciting things come. And they could come quickly, right? Like if you got Satya and Jeff working on this, with throwing the firepower investment they can at it, something big is going to happen, probably in this decade. And it was interesting at the start of GTC, or it was actually probably the pregame show before Jensen's keynote on Tuesday. They did a bunch of panels, about an hour of all kinds of experts. Michael Dell was on there, the CEO of Cadence, a lot of people who've been in the business for a long time. They could talk about their work with Jensen, their fights with Jensen, et cetera, et cetera. And they had Gelsinger on there from Intel. Now, a lot of people badmouth Gelsinger because, what did he do for Intel? But the guy is super sharp. And it was interesting to listen to him talk about the industry and the evolution into accelerated computing. He's super bullish on quantum. He thinks we're going to have a really big breakthrough and practical application in the next 5 years. So, I'm not going to doubt him.
Right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the interaction with quantum computers and AI, because you mentioned QTUM, which is a privately traded company, right? It's not publicly traded. And their CEO also spoke at Nvidia's Quantum event yesterday. And he mentioned that quantum computers will drive AI to new heights, enabling better accuracy and better performance. So do you have any thoughts on how this marriage between quantum computers and AI will work? How will quantum computers make AI better?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to think about it is you have three branches or three pillars, I should call them, three pillars of what computing will look like, in the next 20 years. And so you've got classical CPU computing, you've got accelerated GPU computing, and then you're going to have QPUs. That's a harder one to say, QPU. But and NVIDIA's already been working on this. It's in my report. I talk about why NVIDIA is your number one buy, because if anybody's going to figure out the practical and business applications of quantum computing, it's going to be Jensen and his team. So they released a product last year called QTUM. Now, QTUM is their primary developer software platform. Stands for Compute Unified Device Architecture. So they're applying the power of QTUM to quantum computing. So QTUM, and so this is not like Jensen has no reason to put these companies down other than just to give investors a perspective, and he's going to be there, and he's going to have partnerships with some of these companies. So, so it's going to they're just different ways of doing things. Quantum is going to solve very specific problems. I think it was I don't know if it was Rajiv from QTUM or Mikhail from QEra who said, think of it like a scalpel. Think of quantum computing like a scalpel. It's going to solve very specific problems that classical may not be that suited for. So that's how they work together.
Right. Now, let's talk about quantum computing stocks and how to invest in the team. So if I look at the performance of these stocks, all these stocks, quantum computing, and that's a stock, and D-Wave, AONQ, Rigetti, they all had surged after Google's announcement last year. So if we look at the 12 months performance, these stocks are up between 100% to 500%. But the ride is really, really wild. And year to date, most of these stocks are down a lot, like they are down 50, 60%. So investing in the theme is not easy. And these small pure play quantum computing companies, they may not be profitable anytime soon. They're still losing money, and shares will mostly trade on headlines. And you mentioned that Nvidia is one of the best ways to invest in quantum computing. And we should add that Nvidia is not building a quantum computer, but it is providing the necessary architecture and CUDA software to many of these companies, but many other largest tech companies in the world. We talked about Microsoft, we talked about Amazon, IBM. They all are actually working on quantum computers or on advancing quantum technologies. So what do you think is the best way to invest in the theme? Should investors look at some of these stocks, and you have traded some of these stocks successfully, or it is better, I believe it is better to, use an ETF. A diversified approach is much better because it is too early to predict winners.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked about that last time, that there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. And that's, why Rigetti went to $20 and, D-Wave went to 12 last week. So yeah, you don't dive into these small companies right now at these prices. And some of the companies are questionable. There was I'm not going to mention a name here, but there was one that used to be like a drink distributor, and they renamed themselves a quantum computing company. So, don't really have any numbers to speak of or R&D that I've seen. But, you mentioned IBM. I can't believe I left IBM out. I think IBM is also part of the Chicago Quantum Exchange. And if you want to learn more about that, just Google it. CQE, Chicago Quantum Exchange. You can see all the members and then how they're collaborating on research. It's so cool. That's why I call it the 21st Century Manhattan Project. And when I say Nvidia is my top pick for quantum, what I mean is, and the way I describe it in my report is, first, if you're not an astute semiconductor investor, now is the time to become one. So I take people through, first you build your knowledge and a portfolio around key semiconductor holdings. Of course, Nvidia would be number one. Then you learn about the quantum stocks. And as you recommend, I think one of the best ways is to buy an ETF like QTUM. I don't know the top holdings there, but what that does is when you buy the ETF, you have very low risk, right? It's something you could buy and put away for 10 years and look at it and go, wow, I made 300% on that, whatever it is. But another thing that it does, as I mentioned last time, is when you buy an ETF, then you start learning about the companies and the holdings. You're like, oh, okay, so what do they do? And what do they do? And now that this company became, now I'm looking at QTUM and I see that my D-Wave looks like it has the top weighting. It's 3% just because the stock has run up. But when you buy an ETF for an industry, it can ignite your curiosity to learn more about the companies. And then once you learn more about the companies, then maybe you look for a pullback that you can buy, so that you're not just chasing it because somebody tells you that we're in the quantum revolution and these stocks should all of a sudden be worth billions of dollars when they have only millions of dollars in sales.
Yes, excellent. Totally agree with you. So it is the Defiance Quantum ETF, and it invests in companies which are at the forefront of machine learning and quantum computing, also cloud computing and other transformative computing technologies. That is according to the prospectus. And as you mentioned, D-Wave is the top holding currently because the stock has surged, but the index is balanced twice in a year. So that is in June and December. And at the time of rebalancing, all components are brought to equal weight. So it follows a modified equal weighting methodology. So you get exposure to all these smaller pure play quantum computing companies that we talked about. And you also get exposure to the giants like Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, IBM. All those stocks will be there. And you also get exposure to a lot of foreign stocks. So Alibaba is the second top holding in the ETF because quantum computing research is not limited to the United States. A lot of foreign companies are also working on that technology. So this ETF is a good way, an easy way of getting exposure to the theme. Any closing thoughts, Kevin?
Just that, if you're curious about this, I you just get this stuff on your radar. You visit the Nvidia newsroom once a week and see what's going on there. Their online newsroom where they profile everything. In fact, since we just wrapped up the week of GTC, there's about 15 new press releases this week from Nvidia alone for stuff that they're doing, and one of them should be about the Quantum, the new facility that they're going to have in Boston, and then check out the Chicago Quantum Exchange and just sign up for news alerts. Then the news alerts hit your inbox, and because to me, curiosity solves everything. And so I was just listening to Union Square Ventures is a big VC that's had a lot of success, and I was listening to a podcast, I think A16Z, and the two of the older founders were like, we bring in smart companies and let them teach us what's going on in the world, so that we don't have to pick up a book and learn everything ourselves. We can learn a ton of stuff just from listening to the founders. And they're like, we wouldn't trade this job for anything because we get to learn something new every day. And so that's the way I feel studying technology.
Excellent stuff, Kevin. We'll have to leave it there, but I'm sure we'll talk again in a few months because this is such an exciting topic and there's so much interesting stuff happening in the area. And let's quickly recap the tickers. So quantum computing, and that's a stock. The ticker symbol is QUBT. D-Wave Quantum is QBTS. AONQ is AONQ. RGTI is RGTI. And then the defined quantum ETF is QTUM. Thanks for listening. If you like our show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe so that you do not miss any episode. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please email podcast@zacks.com.
This material is being provided for informational purposes only, and nothing herein constitutes investment, legal, accounting, or tax advice, or a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold a security. Do not act or rely upon the information and advice given in this podcast without seeking the services of competent and professional legal, tax, or accounting counsel. Publication and distribution of this podcast is not intended to create, and the information contained herein does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. No recommendation or advice is being given as to whether any investment or strategy is suitable for a particular investor. It should not be assumed that any investments in securities, companies, sectors, or markets identified and described were or will be profitable. All information is current as of the date herein and is subject to change without notice. Any views or opinions expressed may not reflect those of Zacks Investment Research as a whole.